Here we're going to go over some geometry terms, and then in particular I'm going to show you how to solve some problems when they ask you about supplementary and complementary angles. But first, there's just some basic things that you need to know. This here is the symbol for a line. So you can see by the arrows, that means that it's going into infinity on both sides. So the line extends, on both ends out past those arrows. But you use an arrow just to indicate that it keeps going. So that's the symbol for a line. If it has what we call an endpoint, so it stops, but then goes off into infinity in one direction, that's called a ray. You can think of that as a sun ray, right? Where this is the sun, and the ray just goes forever until it hits the earth. So this is a line, this is a ray. You need to know these simply because they might straight out ask you a question on the test of what is this symbol. So you need to know if it has an endpoint going off into infinity, it's a ray. Similarly, if it has two endpoints, it's called a line segment. So here we have a line, we're just taking a piece of it, a segment of it. So if it has two endpoints, it's a line segment. So that means it stops on both sides. It has two endpoints is what we call them. So make sure you know those three symbols and what their associated names are. When we get into angles, we have something called a right angle, usually denoted where there's a little box here. It's 90 degrees, and it's called a right angle. So it's like the floor and your wall. They form a right angle. They are perpendicular to each other. So 90 degrees is called a right angle. So here are your two. You can see an angle is essentially made up of two rays, right? There's an endpoint here, but then it goes off to infinity in both directions. This is called a right angle. If an angle is less than 90 degrees, it's called an acute angle. So this is less than 90 degrees. So you see this angle here, if this is 90, well, it's smaller than that. So this is less than 90 degrees. So any angle that is less than 90 degrees is called an acute angle. So, even something a little bit bigger or even smaller. All of these are acute angles. They're less than 90 degrees. And if you know about inequalities, this looks like the less than symbol in an inequality. We don't put the arrows on it. That's the inequality sign for less than. So that's a way you can remember that. And it's called acute. If you have an angle that is more than 90 degrees, so you can see here, if this is 90 degrees, well, this is more because the angle is going way over here, right? This is called an obtuse angle, and it's more than 90 degrees. So you kind of go off of everything from the right angle, the 90-degree angle. If it's less than that, it's called acute. If it's more than that, it's called obtuse. So you need to make sure you know those terms as well: right, acute, and obtuse. Alright, there's two other terms that you need to know that I can almost guarantee you're going to get a question on. One of them is called complementary angles. These add up to 90 degrees. Okay? So, if you have two angles and they're complementary, then when you add them together, they're going to equal 90. So if you have one angle that's 20 degrees, and you have another angle that's 80 degrees, and when we're talking about degrees, we're talking about essentially how far it is between the two angles, how many degrees it is. So if this is 20 degrees, this is 80 degrees, are these two complementary? And the answer is no, because 20 plus 80 is 100. So to be complementary, they have to add up to 90, not 100. So these are not complementary. So you need to know this term, complementary angles. They add up to 90. So one type of question they'll get is say, hey, you have a 20-degree angle. What is its complement? What is the angle that makes it complementary? So what do you add to 20 to get 90? Some of you probably just know that intuitively. You know that it's 70, but algebraically you can write that out. 20 plus what number gives you 90? Now we have an algebra problem. If you don't know how to solve this, you need to go back and watch the algebra videos. But essentially, we're going to subtract 20 from each side. And we're going to end up with x equals 70. So the complementary angle to 20 is 70 degrees. This little doohickey up here is the degrees symbol. You write angles in degrees. Alright. The other term that you need to know is called supplementary. Complementary angles. Same idea, but these add up to 180 degrees. So, if you have an angle that's 45 degrees, and they say your other angle is 120 degrees, are these two angles supplementary? Well, 45 plus 120 equals 165. Well, they have to be 180 to be supplementary. So they are not supplementary angles, 45 and 120. Don't make this harder than it is. All you do is add them up. Do they equal 180? If they don't, they're not supplementary. If they do, they are. But what the question you're most likely to get is, okay, with a 45-degree angle, what does the angle have to be supplementary? So again, 45 plus what number is going to give you 180? And if you subtract 45 from each side, you're going to end up with 135. So the supplementary angle to 45 degrees is 135 degrees because 45 plus 135 equals 180. So let's do two more examples. So you have an angle that's 61 degrees. What is the complement of it? Or what's the complementary angle? To figure that out, 61 plus what equals 90. Remember, complementary, they add up to 90. And you just solve it like an algebra problem. X equals, what's 90 minus 61? 29. So the complementary angle to 61 degrees is 29 degrees. If you have an angle that's 127 degrees, what is its supplementary angle? So what plus 127 is going to give you 180? Again, if you don't know how to solve this, you need to go watch the algebra video. But essentially you're just going to subtract 127. So 180 minus 127 is 53. So if they give you a 127-degree angle and ask what angle is supplementary to it, the answer is 53 degrees because when you add the two together, you get 180. So it's important to remember and understand this. Complementary angles add up to 90 degrees, supplemental angles add up to 180 degrees. These are actually very easy questions, so you don't want to get these wrong because it's very simple. Just what adds up to 90, what adds up to 180, but you have to remember that. Supplementary 180, complementary 90.